Good morning, I'm Adam Sexton. In statewide races, open seats have become a bit of a theme in 2024. The biggest one is for governor, with competitive primaries in both major parties. Republican candidate Kelly Ayotte, the former U.S. Senator, is with us this morning. Thanks for coming in.
Great to be here, Adam. Thank you.
So it feels like years ago that we had you on in September because we held that whole presidential primary process.
Oh, I know. I was so busy with all the presidential candidates.
We didn't know for sure who the nominee was going to be. Now we do. It is former President Donald Trump, and you're going to be sharing a ticket with him for the first time since 2016. I've talked to a lot of grassroots Trump supporters, and they want to revisit this issue that happened in October of 16 when you withdrew your endorsement over the Access Hollywood tape. They want to know, do you regret doing that?
Well, I have to say, you know, as I look at this presidential race, were we better off 4 years ago? And there's no question we were better off under President Trump, whether we look at inflation, whether we look at the mess at the border, energy policy, we can go on and on. And as you know, we had our differences in 16, but I think as we look at where we are as a country right now, there's no question that he's the right choice for White House, and just the contrast between the two administrations, especially on this border issue.
And you said you'll stand by the nominee no matter what, but do you regret having done what you did in 16?
You know, Adam, I certainly appreciate that where we are as a country right now, it's important that we have new leadership, that we secure our border, that we really protect the American people, and let's drive costs down, energy costs. And there's a clear choice in this campaign, and there's no doubt for me that where we are, we need new leadership, and the contrast between the two administrations, the choice is clear in this race.
There are some Republicans who are also wary of your support in 2013 for an immigration bill that included a path to citizenship. Is your position now that you oppose any kind of amnesty?
First of all, I've not supported amnesty. That's just not true. The truth is, I think this is probably coming from
2013. This is the Gang of Eight bill,
listen,
and it had a path to citizenship.
That bill, first of all, they're doubled the amount of border patrol. It doubled the amount of fencing. The people that had to pay a fine get in the back of the line. Criminals were shipped out. And if you look at where we are now, it is a complete mess. And so what I support is making sure that New Hampshire has no sanctuary cities, no sanctuary places, no driver's licenses for illegal immigrants. And let's do a big contrast by what's happening over in Massachusetts. And if you look at the Democrats running in this race, for example, Joyce Craig, who has been endorsed by the governor of Massachusetts, and yet she won't answer questions like, why won't you answer questions about where you stand on sanctuary cities? Where do you stand on the $1 billion that has been spent in Massachusetts housing illegal immigrants with very little transparency? So I'm going to be strong on keeping this state safe, making sure that we protect the citizens of this state, and we're not going to become a sanctuary state.
So to be clear, though, in 2013, you did support a path to citizenship. You're quoted as saying it's, quote, tough but fair, and now you do not support a path to citizenship.
Let me just say I don't, because we're in a position where if you look at what has happened in the Biden administration, with millions of people coming over the border unvetted, obviously, we're in a position, just looking over our southern border in Massachusetts, $1 billion spent on housing illegal immigrants. We have public safety issues where unfortunately those sanctuary states not cooperating with law enforcement really create a very dangerous situation. So no, I'm going to be very tough on this issue as governor.
Specific to that, the Pew Research Center estimates there are about 10,000 to 15,000 undocumented immigrants living in New Hampshire. Former President Trump has said if he's back in office in January of 2025, top priority is going to be a mass deportation effort to get illegal immigrants out of the country. Obviously, some kind of effort to round up all these people. New Hampshire doesn't have the detention space currently to hold most of those people before they're processed and deported. What level of spending are you willing to entertain to create some kind of space for them to be held while that's being processed?
Adam, let's just be clear. There's been millions of people that have come over the border, both the southern, and we also have an increase in illegal immigration over our northern border. Criminals, yeah, we're going to send them back. If you look at the people who have come from countries that pose a danger to the United States, those individuals coming over to this country without vetting, sure, we should find out who they are, and we should send them back, and we should protect our country. So will I work with the administration on protecting our country and keeping New Hampshire safe? there's no greater priority for me to make sure that the people of the state are safe. That's what I did as Attorney General. That is what I will do as governor of the state of New Hampshire.
But to be clear, there are people who have not committed criminal violations in the state of New Hampshire who would probably be caught up in this.
Well, let's be clear,
Adam. Right?
Let's start with the criminals, and we'll start with the people that are on the terror watch list, and we'll start with the people that have come from countries that pose a danger to us. And there's a lot of work to be done there to keep this country safe.
On the abortion issue, you've made your position clear. You're going to protect the status quo and the current law in New Hampshire. You know, you've tacked towards Governor Chris Sununu as a very popular governor, and obviously your own person and your own positions. But the governor has also said he, if it ever reached his desk, would sign a bill codifying Roe v. Wade, guaranteeing abortion rights up until that 24-week mark. Is that something you would do? Would you sign a bill to enshrine those abortion rights in law until 24 weeks when the ban takes effect?
Well, Adam, it's already enshrined in law in New Hampshire in the sense that I support our current law, and a woman is free to get an abortion for any reason up to 6 months in this state. And also in the last 3 months, if God forbid she suffers from a medical emergency or her baby suffers from a fatal fetal anomaly, she can still get an abortion. So I would say I'm going to protect that law, I'm going to defend it, and if anything more restrictive comes forward, I will veto it. So that actually is really codifying that issue for the state of New Hampshire and for the women of this state.
But it's not explicitly in the law that it's guaranteed, I guess. So if that bill reached your desk...
The law is guaranteed because the law says you have the freedom to obtain an abortion up to 6 months in this state. So that is guaranteed, and I will protect the law.
In the Senate, you were out front on the issue of in vitro fertilization with rights of conscience. You were urging that insurers be able to deny that coverage if that was against their belief or employers believe it was against their belief.
Adam, that is the biggest whopper told in this race.
Well, you signed on to the Blunt Amendment, right?
Listen, the Blunt Amendment had nothing to do with IVF. Go read the language. These are lies pushed by the Democrats. There's absolutely, first of all, that had to do with the Affordable Care Act. The Affordable Care Act doesn't cover IVF. That's why New Hampshire actually passed a law to mandate IVF coverage, which I fully support. And so I am absolutely going to protect the rights of women to have IVF treatment in this state. And in fact, the issue we should be focusing on is making it more affordable for women. And I'm going to work hard to do that in the corner office. So that is one of the biggest lies told in this race.
So you never did
IVF.
Oppose the idea that IVF could be restricted by employers under rights of conscience?
No, there was absolutely no vote on that. That's it's been an outright lie. The vote that they're talking about did not mention IVF. It was about the rights of conscience related to the Affordable Care Act, but it had absolutely nothing to do with IVF.
But they certainly could have restricted it as a right of conscience,
No,
right?
it could not, because it is not even contained in the Affordable Care Act. So I want the women of this state to understand I support IVF treatment. There's just been complete lies told about this. I have never voted to restrict that treatment, and I'm going to fight hard as governor of the state of New Hampshire to make it more affordable for the women of this state.
So in the Concord, there's a huge and very passionately debated issue right now over what sort of rights transgender people and kids have and don't have. And the legal underpinning for a lot of the things that Republicans at the State House oppose is this 2018 law signed by Governor Chris Sununu. It was only supported by 3 Republicans in the state Senate that essentially made gender identity a protected class. If you're governor and there's a bill that is brought forward by Republicans to either remove that protected class or restrict it in some ways, is that something you would support?
Well, Adam, first of all, I want people to be able to live their life and be the person that they want to be. That's important. That's about freedom. But there are areas I have concerns, like, for example, women's sports. I have a daughter who played 3 sports in high school. She's now at the Air Force Academy. She played soccer, basketball, lacrosse, worked really hard at those sports. So that's an area I have concerns about in terms of fairness, safety, and also Title IX in protecting. We fought so hard for women's sports. So on that area, I want to have, everyone have an opportunity to participate, but I want to make sure that really biological women are competing against each other.
The issue of cannabis legalization, if they can't get that done in this legislature with this governor, is that something you would entertain at all, or are you a firm no on legalization as governor?
I don't think legalizing marijuana is the right direction for our state. As we think about our fentanyl crisis, I'm concerned about the impact of that. And, thinking about young people and mental health. There's been studies that have been done that show that smoking marijuana or ingesting cannabis in the young ages of teenagers up to 25 have led to a greater incidence of bipolar, schizophrenia, other mental health issues. So thinking about some of the mental health crisis that we have to address in this state, I don't think this helps advance that cause or our quality of life. So I don't support legalizing marijuana in this state.
All right, as we wrap up here, there's been a lot of discussion at the State House of this Representative John Stone of Claremont. News 9 reported he lost his job as a Claremont police officer almost 2 decades ago over questionable behavior that allegedly included severe and graphic threats of violence against fellow police officers, the police chief, and the police chief's wife. Claremont City Council, we've reported, is removing Stone from certain committees. He's endorsed your campaign. Are you standing by him?
Well, let me just say this. I have hundreds of endorsements. I do not agree with that behavior. I do not condone his behavior. And he's going to have to answer, for the allegations of what happened 18 years ago. So if we want to talk about endorsements, though, let's talk about the endorsement of Maura Healey for Joyce Craig, because if we see what's happening in Massachusetts, that's an endorsement where we can see a big policy difference between me and Joyce Craig, who's running for governor, whether it's on taxes and whether it's on spending and illegal immigration. To me, that's a critical issue I want the people of New Hampshire to think about.
All right, former Senator Ayotte, thanks for joining us on Close Up. We'll see you out there on the trail.
Thank you so much.